how would you diagnose it, or how would you talk to the parents about it, or the kids?
I would, but even, and when just to take a step back, we were talking about, I remember when I was saying individual counseling is really about individual diagnosis, and that's when insurances pay. So there are people who specialize in marriage counseling, but insurance doesn't pay for it. It's not recognized as a mental health issue, right?
Okay.
So back to relationship issues, it could be said that relationship issues happen because, or it would benefit, let's say that marriages would benefit from people having individual counseling and then perhaps getting marriage counseling. There's, the questions you're asking aren't necessarily mental health questions, aren't psychology questions.
Okay.
Some of them are a lot social questions,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
More cultural questions than they are psychology.
Yeah.
So what focus do you mainly deal with?
I do individual and marriage counseling, and I'm a children's mental health specialist. And all that means is that I trained under someone who was a children's mental health specialist. You have to have certain many hours of training, and then for 2 years you work specifically with children.
Okay.
So I do a diverse population on purpose,
Mhm.
right? So I've experienced some of the things you're asking about, and it would take, I think I mentioned this before, it would take a lot of research to answer even one of these questions, let alone, several of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you see kids who have divorced parents,
Mhm.
what are some questions like a child would ask you or would vent to you?
Okay, good question. Most kids' first question when they hear their parents are getting divorced, the question is, what's going to happen to me?
Mm-hmm.
What about me? Where will I go? Who will take care of me? It's not being selfish. That's just how kids are. They're ego-centered. And they say, what does this change going to mean for me? Right? So you see a lot of, we had already talked about attachment issues before you got here. A lot of anxiety and depression in kids who feel like it's their fault or that they should have done something to stop it. So with kids, we do resilience training so that, and here's the thing, especially when one or the other parent is bringing them to counseling, sometimes kids do need to talk about what they're experiencing with one or other parent,
Okay.
but it's more helpful instead of making the ex, whoever it is,
Mhm.
the ex looking like this bad person. That's never helpful to the child, right?
Right.
So what helps the kid is to be able to learn different skills, and we just call them life skills, to deal with people. So it doesn't matter if dad's particularly difficult, or maybe some grandparents or mom's particularly difficult to deal with. That doesn't matter. We don't say, how are you going to deal with your mom this weekend? We just say, what are some concerns and what would work for you? What kind of things are you going to try? So that they can gain some skills. And that might be to reduce their own anxiety about not knowing where they're going or exactly what's going to happen. When they go to one parent's house, they worry about the other parent sometimes. Like, I can't go here because I don't know what's going to happen to my mom when I'm there for the weekend. Or I don't know if my dad's going to be okay. You know what I mean? Kids take on things that are their responsibility that really are not.
Is it the same with younger kids compared to older kids? Like, do young kids understand it as much and worry as much as do...
It depends on the kid, but some children are more like in tune to adult feelings. They take on the emotions, and that's not to say they always interpret them correctly, but they, if they see their mom continually crying, like weeks and weeks of crying, they need to be told that it's okay. that it's okay. She's gonna cry, but it's still gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying there is a big difference in age groups, and if they're more well in tuned into their parents versus, I'm really young, I don't quite understand it.
Right.
Maybe it's just my
Right.
fault.
I think younger kids that I've seen are more likely to be anxious because they have all these questions. They don't know what's going to happen. I think even middle school, high school, even kids in college, I think they're more angry. Like if their parents get divorced, they exhibit more anger, which can come out as depression or other issues as opposed to anxiety.
And would you say from those like underlying issues and other things kind of happen or behavior show up because of that anxiety from the divorce led to other things?
It certainly can. Yeah. We had been talking about earlier if kids have a good support system. So let's say they're really assured, we both still love you, you're still important to us, everything. And this is true actually of older kids too. Like if they are promised, oh, we'll pay for your college. If parents are still saying, yes, you're still going to get that car, or we'll still help you get your license, we'll still help you pay for college. That's a lot easier to face, I think, the change of divorce than if it's just like, you're on your own now, right? So kids still feel cared about. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes
the attachment.
when people split, a lot of kids have said, I was fine until my whoever, mom or dad, went off and got a new family. And that really ticked me off. Right? Which is understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of children don't even like having younger siblings. Right? They feel displaced, like I was the star until this person came along, right? So it's understandable that kids would feel like, wow, my parents left the house and pretty much gone and started a new family. But that's probably the worst things for kids to feel, that they've been like traded in for
Somebody else.
yeah, that they've essentially been divorced instead of just their parents are divorced. Yeah.
So then, are there different approaches you take towards people that have like they're divorced, say they're single or one family went off? Like, are there different ways you approach that? Like, is it more sensitive, or is it?
That depends a lot on the kid too. Here's the thing about therapy with kids, is they may never really talk about the issue. Or it may take them like 2 months. And the parent saying, have they told you about what happens on the weekend? I'm like, no, not yet, right? You can't sit down a kid, you can help them draw, they can create things, they can play in a dollhouse, they can do play, they could kind of charades or play answers with games, they could do a lot of things and never really say what the problem is, and it can still be helpful. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or sometimes adults want them to say, Dad hurt my feelings because he didn't come on Tuesday like he promised. Right? They may never say that.
But it's still helpful for them to do other stuff around it.
Yes. Yeah.
So dealing with the problem without approaching the problem, is kind of.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that may be too much for the kid to handle. Maybe they want to cry because they asked a friend over and the friend said no. And they're crying about that, and all the adults in their life know it's really about this. That's okay. Yeah.
Okay. In class we're talking a little about conscious and unconscious. How there's a theory about your unconscious, how it lets out more, like how they used to do the blots. And do you do anything like that with kids?
I don't. But essentially that is what art is about, drawing, and even with playing in a playhouse with kids. Yeah. Things come out in the unconscious. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't use different techniques.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But if you draw something and the kid sees something in it, that's in a sense like a Rorschach, right?
Mhm.
Without, I mean, you would never show a kid.
Yeah.
You know, what is this? But it can even be a picture of something. I don't have any in here, but you know, there's pictures of somebody sitting alone on a bench, and the kid might give you a really good story about that. And you pretty much know what they're thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because see, the thing is about kids, most of it is unconscious because they don't have the vocabulary to let you know what it really is. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
How young of kids do you deal with?
3.
3. Okay. So pretty young.
They just need to be verbal. So even if a 4 or 5-year-old wasn't verbal, or if I couldn't understand their speech, that wouldn't work.
Okay. Okay. So what do you use for kids that aren't very verbal?
Almost all kids become verbal over time, if they indeed can speak.
Okay.
You know, they're able to. So if you give them time and they need to become comfortable with you, I think that's a good thing when they are first a little cautious, right? And then they kind of warm up to you, and then pretty soon they won't stop talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just healthy.
So you have to get